Every data and study is incomplete without the intervention of science and technology. Our second keynote address is from the personality who has helped initiate several new programs related to infrastructure, human capacity building, innovation, and startups. R&D in advanced manufacturing, waste processing, clean energy, and cyber physical systems. All in all, a versatile scientific approach. I welcome Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, Ministry of Science and Technology, for his keynote address. The
Thank you
floor
indeed.
is
Good
yours, sir.
afternoon. Good afternoon to all. I'm so delighted that the setting was set up by my minister, Dr. Harshanji, Minister of Science and Technology, Earth Sciences, and also Health and Family Welfare. So indeed, he is a very passionate, very committed champion. I think there's some feedback. So if people turn off their mic unless they're speaking, that would be nice. Um, Okay, this is such an important area that we are discussing, and I'm so happy to see. I've already seen two watermen here. One, our Dr. Arvind Kumar, totally committed. I've been to his meetings for last 4 years, 5 years maybe. I even forget how long, but as long as I've known him, he is one champion of water who stands out. And then, of course, we heard very deep insights into everything from science and technology to policy to regulation and what to be done by my very famous friend, Mr. UP Singh, another Jal Shakti, another waterman. So it's fantastic. It's looking really, really great. And you see, water. So I think so much about it all the time. And in fact, I drink a lot of it, 5 liters a day. So it's something very intimate, very personal to me. And we all need clean water, clearly. Now, water and air are two things that we totally underestimate in their importance and in their continuity and their, value, actually. And it was already pointed out by Mr. UP Singh that a lot of it is because we get water cheap, we get air free. So, first of all, familiarity leads to contempt. That is one aspect. The other is what I got in plenty without paying nothing for it. I cannot respect it. And so when we think about water, actually, first thing we think about, of course, nowadays, a lot of people say data is another important thing in today's world. Of course, also related to water and everything else. So they say data is the new oil. You know, we must have all heard about it. I just totally disagree with that. And I have been a champion of correcting them by saying data is the new water because oil is totally dispensable. It's going to disappear. Nobody cares about oil and certainly not going to care about it in 50 years from now. So, water, on the other hand, is central to who we are as organic life forms. We don't watch out for it. Today, we got water coming out from underground. In Rajasthan, it may be 1 million years old. So it took it thousands of years to form that layer of water percolating slowly through these porous rocks. And it's gone in 10 years. So now, when we think about water, I think most of it has been covered by Mr. UP Singh, so I would not dwell on the same aspects. Where we say, look, first of all, there is, water and anything for that matter. It has two very important aspects. The first one is what I call nexus. So while we have so many different ministries and so many different technologies, and which is all very good, the fact is you cannot see water in isolation with agriculture. 75% water goes into agriculture. You cannot see water away from energy. In fact, the amount of water which is really thrown away, circulated in our power plants is tremendous. So there's a nexus between water and energy, and certainly between water and health. So some of which is what you're looking at here. So especially in the time of COVID-19, when I looked at just now, I looked at the title of this webinar, and I said, "What is COVID-19 got to do with water?" Well, of course, it was clarified that look, of course, about biomedical waste and all that stuff. But really, you see, even when COVID-19 has disappeared from the margins of history book, water would still be there. And water problems would still be 10x, 100x, a million x of what they are now. They make no mistakes about it. So now, You see, to give you some example, it was correctly pointed out. Really, first thing I want to tell very clearly, it is not science and technology which is the limiting factor in our use and abuse of water. In fact, I'll give you a little personal example. See, because I used to work in nanotechnology, in particular looking at nanotechnology of energy, water, and so on. We had, this was long time ago. We had a minister visiting my center in IIT Kanpur. So he told me, he said, "Can you make some new nanotechnology for cleaning up River Ganga?" So I said, "Sir, you don't need nanotechnology to clean River Ganga." So he said, "So what do we need?" I said, "You check up on your inspectors." And that end of that conversation, I never got a new project. I should have said that nanotechnology is good for cleaning River Ganga, right? But you see, whole point is I totally agree. Anybody who say, look, science and technology is not the limiting factor. What is the limiting factor? First of all, it is the will of society. It is economics, economics of situation, as was pointed out correctly. There is a price to pay for everything. Society as a whole has to be at a level which can afford this price. Third aspect is awareness. So there are a whole lot of things that don't impact economy, but it's about very general, deep.
Uh, can you hear me, sir? Hello? There's some technical issue, I guess, networking issue. It's a bad network, I guess, at his side.
Looks like
Yes,
me and Ashutosh are friends for last 43 years.
that's great to know, sir.
We joined on the same day IIT Kanpur, same batch, and we have been a friend since then, 1977 onwards.
Yeah, the network is bad at his end. He has
Looks like.
left the meeting. He'll again join in it.
Okay, let's hope so. It's always interesting to hear Ashutosh actually. ठीक है. Ashutosh says he is waiting to be admitted. Kindly admit him.
Yes, he's been admitted.
I just talked to him. He was saying he is waiting to be
Yeah,
admitted.
he has been admitted.
Okay,
Does it?
fine.
No problem. I know that once you admit people, you don't look for to admit new people. Somebody, the god of technology out there didn't like his criticism that I was pursuing. So he said, let me show you the power of technology. See, now you're out. Let's see how you back in. Right.
Welcome
Okay.
back, sir.
So
Please.
perfect. So I've already lost 2 minutes and I would make up for it by not speaking so long. So I promise you that. Okay, so what I was saying is, look, there are two aspects in every technology that we need to pay attention to. The first one is nexus. When we talk about food, we talk about water. When we talk about health, we talk about water. When we talk about energy, we talk about water, right? Really, and vice versa. Second aspect is what you would call paying respect to life cycle analysis. And again, this was brought in very forcefully by UP Singh. He said, look, it's not enough to just set up the dam plant. You have to run it for 50 years. Make sure that it's running. And I have that personal experience. Near Kanpur, there are lots of plants that have been set up with much fanfare. And indeed, they never run. They run with 10% capacity, which is even worse because 90% of the stuff goes right. So very, very important aspect. So water is, of course, not only about its purification, it's about distribution, it's about conservation, it's about harvesting. It is having different kind of water, black, gray, white, whatever, all of that. Some of it comes from household, some from industry, some in the rivers, ponds, lakes, all of that. So there is, the country is very diverse, its water sources are diverse. And as we know, the one size doesn't fit all. In fact, if you look at the water problem in Himalayas, is very different from water problem in Thar Desert. And we know that in Himalayas, about 1 million springs have dried up. And we have written a report on it saying where were those springs, what is their catchment area, where does the water come from there, and how do you actually revive them. So this is a very holistic problem. It's not only related only to one aspect of science or tech. Also, now we are flying drones with LiDAR, with different sensors to see what are the catchment areas of these springs. Whole lot of have dried up because, the degradation of habitat around these springs. So how do you actually revive them? So the point is, even if after we have mapped all of this, even after we know how to revive them, who's going to do it? So I think we basically come to the point that unless there is a very strong awareness and commitment of local population, awareness and commitment, as well as, of course, the resources which might be needed for it, unless all of that actually comes together, technology alone, mapping, all of that is not going to solve our problem, much less it has solved our problem either about Ganga or anybody else, even though the fact is that the waste water processing technologies are known for a long time and they can in fact even be effective. So that is just the opening stuff. Now there are lots of course, there are lots of things we see around us which are related to water. But somehow we kind of close our eyes and say, really, this problem is not going to be solved. So this is about the will of society, as I was saying, at large. Now take one such problem. You see cotton. Cotton, 1 kg of cotton to produce it, it takes about 8,000 liters of water in India. Somewhere else, I know the minimum amount of water that it needs about 5,000 liters. Regardless whether 5,000, 8,000 liters, what have you. Every cheap raw 1 kg, we are actually exporting virtually 8,000 liters of water. Horror of horrors, that 8,000 of liter of water may in fact be even the purified form. It's not just agriculture grade water. Because a whole lot of this water is, as I said, is coming from underground sources, underground water, which is a really good, non-degraded, pure form of water in many cases, unless I, have contaminated that with industrial activity. So the question is, must we grow these crops where there is no water? Whether it's sugar cane, whether it is cotton, whatever. It's not saying that we don't need them. We certainly need them. But is there a crop that matches the terrain and the climate and so on? So it's a very big question, and clearly it's not a question of science and technology. We know all the answers in science and technology, but we don't know how to convert that in terms of what would be useful for society at a speed and scale. This is actually a much larger problem than in water. So I would not actually, worry too much about it. But just to say that the new Science, Technology and Innovation Policy 2020, which is coming up very quick, very fast, with a lot of very widespread stakeholder consultations, would actually address many of these issues about the fact that it's not the lack of science and technology that is hampering our progress. But taking it, connecting it to society, to industry, to all the stakeholders there. So now, of course, in terms of agriculture, we know that there are, of course, things like precision agriculture and so on. Some of it may be useful, whether it's through Internet of Things, whether it is through flying a drone. So you know that today you can do actually hyperspectral imaging. What that means is you got this sensor, and that actually tells you an image that you take. It tells you everything about the moisture level. It tells you about the health of the crop. It tells you about the maturity of the crop. It tells you a whole lot of things. So all of this actually could be taken care by that, and by saying that, look, okay, when do we give water, how much water, what kind of fertilizer, what kind of pesticide, all of that could be based on evidence and based on the data that one collects, and that has to do with soil health and all this stuff is going on. It has to be done in a much more committed way and much more widespread way. Now, talking about the quality of water, see, we can't do nothing much about water unless we know we can quantify its quality. How do we quantify the quality? Of course, there are also air sensors. We quantify all that and say it's bad, not bad, whatever. Right? Now, there was a very big project, a mission really, that was set up about 3 years ago in a 50-50 partnership with Intel. So Intel, to make these chips, to make these low-cost sensors, which have onboard power for several years. It also has onboard communication. And imagine these are called smart pebbles. So each one of may cost a couple of thousand of rupees. So you take tens of thousands of those and you scatter them all over the place. And real time, they are actually relaying information about what is going on. See, because the mapping of pollution, it is not as simple as simply, saying what are the point sources, where is it all coming from, where is it all going, how is it distributed, in order to have a good way of dealing with it. And then it generates huge amount of data, which gets processed through big data, artificial intelligence, and so on in the back office. And it's constantly telling you what kind of interventions would be needed. So that is all tech aspect. But I'm a little skeptical, maybe not very skeptical, but a little skeptical that all this tech and the data which is generated, who's going to act on it? And what is the will actually to act on it, and what are the resources and muscle and the mechanisms to act on it. So all of these things are something that as we go along, we have to pay attention to those, uh, because technology is either available or it can be generated, it can be made available at short notice as long as you can project the requirement. And we have seen this in the time of COVID-19. 4 months ago, everything was imported, from the little PPEs to N95 masks to ventilators to diagnostic kits. And these are fairly high-tech items, some of them. But within 4 months, not only you have the best of quality, global quality in these products, but they're also being manufactured at scale. There is enough capacity, in fact, to export them. So point I'm trying to make here is that there is such a thing as projecting very clearly the technology need. This has to be done by the consumers of knowledge, not by the producers of knowledge. So, who are these consumers of knowledge? They are line ministries, this industry, they are local bodies, can even be municipal corporation, which actually reminded me. Few years ago, there's some municipal corporation actually, I think it was the Central Pollution Control Board, I don't remember who. Anyway, they had approached us and they said, look, a lot of these waste processing plants are being established by municipal corporations, by many other people, players in it, but they keep saying we are technology agnostic. We don't, basically it's a way of saying we don't know about technology, and neither do we care to know about it. So we are going to go with L1 with a global tender. But can you do it better? So he said, certainly you can do it better. So we made a compendium of these waste processing technologies and shared it with all these people who are likely to set up waste processing plants. Right? Now, you see, whole point is whole lot of these, especially the solid waste processing plants, they don't work too well or they break down after a year or a half because the technology that they imported is not relevant for our cities, because the kind of mixed waste that we have is not something you would find in Netherlands or somewhere else. So in as much as that, understanding the technology and appropriate technology and relevant technology and its maintenance and its use are indeed very critical. So that's the technology dimension that we should pay attention to. Now I would conclude because let me see. I have until 4:10 to go according to this plan. But hey, don't get too worried. I would stop before that. So, okay. See, so because you mentioned COVID-19 and biomedical waste, we started a program, in fact, in three kind of waste processing about 4 years ago. So these were the most difficult waste to my mind and most important and most toxic. So one of them is polymer plastic waste. The second one is indeed biomedical waste. And the third one, which is pure wealth. So when we talk about waste to wealth, the best example of that is electronic waste. So electronic waste is actually concentrated wealth. And all you need to do is have right scientific way of recycling it. You get gold out of it. You get all sorts of precious metals and other stuff that comes right going out of it. If you really knew how to do it, unfortunately, a whole lot of it happens in informal sector who don't know how to do it. But they can make a quick buck and then therefore poison the remaining environment by dumping everything that remains out there. Another very interesting example is you see that the liquid waste, it comes from the landfills. We have heard of leachate. So leachate is a very toxic thing, and we have these dumps that look like small hills or even mountains, and all the rainwater and all the stuff that percolates down there, it comes out as a very toxic water coming out there. I have seen it personally. I visited all these toxic dumps and see what kind of problems are there. So you see, this is because the dumps have not been set up scientifically. There are two ways to do it, which means once you have created the mess, you go about cleaning it, or you set up things to begin with in scientifically sound way, which means that it would minimize the waste or the toxic things which are going to be generated. And that these landfills is a classical example of that, which means if we were to plan a new landfill site, then you make sure that the leachate management is taken care of, and it is not that difficult. So maybe perhaps additional 5% the cost of the site preparation, that you would actually have something which is working, and then would be much easier to clean up also later. So all of this basically requires that we do some scientific planning at time t equal to zero, and not just think, oh, well, chalta hai, and then there's jugaad hai. You see, so we have to move away from jugaad and do scientific planning for any of these things, and that's going to have very huge dividends. So I would conclude now, as I said, by saying about biomedical waste and especially COVID-19 waste. You see, COVID-19 waste can be a huge problem in hospitals. All kind of infectious waste is a huge problem in hospitals. So I have seen a lot of innovations actually happen in this space. Again, in the last 4 to 5 months, to give you an example, Sri Chitra Institute of Medical Science and Technology in Thiruvananthapuram, they came up with these garbage bins for hospitals, which are now being used, is being produced commercially, and I'm sure there are competing products of this kind from other places. So it has a lining inside. That lining actually neutralizes the virus. So basically you keep dumping everything in there, then you close it, then you let it remain for a certain number of hours before disposing of it. So this is a very simple example. There are a whole lot of fluids that fly out from the patients of COVID-19, and all of them are also collected in this kind of bin, right, which goes in your mouth. So it neutralizes the virus before you dispose of it. Similarly, you see, there's a very simple, low-hanging technology fruit, which unfortunately again doesn't get implemented. So all the wards and all the hospitals which are dealing with COVID-19 patients, they are supposed to maintain a little bit of negative pressure inside. What that means is that there is a duct which sucks out the air, and we know that virus spreads by these, bodily fluid transmission through droplets and all the fluids which are flying all over the place in a hospital, in ICU, collected, taken in through a scrubber and neutralized there. And imagine, I mean, this is not a huge expense. All you need is couple of lakhs. And imagine every little patient is paying much more than that to be in that ward for a couple of days. So I think, the bottom line in all of this, the more you think about it, it is not that we don't know what the solutions are. Of course, somebody out there knows what the solution is. I can guarantee you that if we really wanted solution, we would, I'm sure, we would find them, and we would find them even solutions which are economically feasible and make sense. All right, imagine if you were to contaminate five more people by not doing this, by not maintaining negative pressure in the ward. What is the cost of that? I mean, forget about the human cost. What is the cost of treatment? What is the cost of downtime? I have done all these calculations back of the envelope, and it just doesn't make sense that these people don't implement it. So you really think deeply. You say, why are they not implement? Are they stupid? Are they greedy? No, they're not stupid. They are top of the line doctors and everybody else, hospital managers, right? Are they greedy? Maybe they are, but because like I pointed out, if you spend 5 lakhs, going to make a difference in their bottom line, right? Just keep another patient for 2 more days, for heaven's sake, and you would have recovered the money, right? I'm saying all this in lighter way, by the way. So don't take it seriously. Don't quote me on this. But anyway, so it's not that. The point is that people just don't appreciate. Okay, they don't have this deep awareness that look, there is a problem and there is a solution for it, and for heaven's sake, let me go about troubleshooting this problem, not just, twiddle my thumb and say somebody else is going to do it. Oh, should I really do it? It's going to take my time. All this. It's not in our consciousness to really worry about things because we know how to deal with garbage. Throw it in your neighbor's yard, for example, right? So the easiest way, so this is a culture that permeates all our brains very, very uniformly. And so it is not technology. There's so many, now people were saying, look, that we wash our hands so many time in COVID-19, and certainly that puts in, degrades water more than the usual. And it's not just that. This water is actually laced with surfactants, right? So it is not as simply as, okay, more water down the drain, but it's much more difficult water to clean, if you would, and to recycle. So of course that there are disinfectants which are alcohol based, which is not a solution. There is not like saying this famous queen who said, if you don't have chapati, eat bread, right? So okay, if you don't have water, use,
Yeah.
alcohol-based disinfectants, which is not really a great solution. But there are, of course, these so-called green surfactants, biodegradable surfactants, and a whole lot of these formulations have come in the market. They're about 50% more expensive than the alcohol, the usual stuff that goes around and so on. So again, it's a question of policy. It's a question of how much you lose in terms of water and it's recycling. What is the value you put on water, right? And since we put no value on water or nearly zero, even for agriculture, that is a huge disaster. I mean, this is one low-hanging fruit. See, we clearly don't want, nobody would want that the water should not be used where it is required in the quantity and quality that is required. So I would just conclude by saying that you see that we must make available water in quality and quantity for specific applications which is required. But we must not make it available on such terms which would lead to gross abuse. And the amount of water that you can save simply by this policy, right, which we can all imagine is how hard would that be, right? But the disruptive power of just this simple thinking in water could be so huge that we won't have to really worry about any other option at this moment for with all the amount of water that one can actually save. And so our domestic water, for example, now everybody worth his salt has this water purifier sitting at home, isn't it? I have had it for 2 decades. I don't know how long. Anyway, and it's been throwing away more than 50% of water as saline water because it's a membrane-based unit, right? So I have been asking my friends, some of whom are in water business, saying, look, they're not making any sense. We are throwing away all this good water. Of course, in one household, it appears small, but you integrate over the entire country and going forward, where everybody is purifying water for their use, the amount of water we are throwing away is simply criminal. So, and there is a solution for it. So there are now models of this which would send in this water, saline water, which is being discarded into your overhead tank, right? So it mixes there. You use it for bathing, you use it for irrigation, and anyway, it's very small amount. So it goes into overhead tank. Then it gets diluted there. So it's not going to change the quality of overall water up there. These little interventions. So I'm very happy to tell you that today I'm going to install that kind of purifier at my home. The guy is just working on it right now. That's how I remembered it, and I said I should spread the good message about this. I'm so happy that I got rid of that old solution, and that we are going to conserve some, 10 liters of water a day doing that. And you multiply that with the power of the people, the number of people that we have in this country. It only requires commitment, it requires will, it requires understanding, it requires compassion for water and how bad it's going to be in the future, and all of that, and awareness and education. So let's get on with that. I'm indeed very thankful, Dr. IWF and UNEP, and of course Dr. Arvind Kumar and everybody who is here for bringing this to people. Please bring it to the doorsteps of people, not just with people like me and you. We talk about water all the time. There are lots of experts that talk about water all the time. Then we go home, right? How let's think about how it's going to reach 100 crore people in a simplified way, so they get on with it, just like we do puja every day or something, go here there. If it becomes part of our life, then it's going to work, right? Thank you again. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir, for your perspective on water usage and also bringing forth the idea of rural and urban, as well as giving us an idea of the examples what you have shared of neutralizing of the virus. Thank you so much. Now, with the policy sessions completed, we